The Soybean School on RealAgriculture.com is brought to you by Pride Seeds, Nodulator Pro, and Cruiser Max Vibrance Beans.
Bernard Tobin here on the Soybean School, joined today by Horst Bohner of OMAFRA's soybean specialist. Hey, sir, thank you for taking the time.
You're welcome.
It is that time of the year, into December, when I usually stop by. We chat about how this year in soybeans sort of went.
Yes.
I was here in May, and we were talking about how rainy it was and how late this year was going to be. Let's start there. How did that impact the year?
It really was a tough spring season for a lot of growers, wasn't it? I mean, it's so frustrating when you want to plant and you just can't because the weather doesn't cooperate. But we both know that eventually things turned around and the vast majority of soybean acreage was seeded, right? And within a reasonable time frame, right? It wasn't that it was 6 weeks late, that kind of thing. And at the end of the day here, you know, considering that slow start and the fact that for some of us, there were other challenges, right? It got dry for August and parts of September in south of London, you know, in a pretty significant geography. And in eastern Ontario, white mold was a big problem. So you take those issues into consideration, and then just not a real warm, like soybeans like heat, right? Not a real warm year. And yet at the end of the day, it looks like we'll end up with about a 43 bushel per acre average across the province. And that's down from 46, the 5-year average. But considering the year, I think most of us should be pretty grateful if we're in that window. Now, there's a huge range, right? I mean, some of these fields that had white mold, I've heard as low as 9 bushels. Ouch, right? I mean, you don't even want to talk about that. And then on the high end, you know, where the fertility was there and the moisture came, mid-70s, right? In our plots, some just incredible yields, into the 80s. Just gorgeous beans.
Talk about, I guess, you know, that season. Away we went, along we went, and we finally got that big shot of heat at the end of the year. Obviously, it saved the corn crop.
Oh, no question.
What did they do for the soybean crop?
Oh, I think very similar. I mean, we would have been in trouble, right? I mean, beans aren't the same as corn. They would have finished up, but it sure helped to be able to get them off in a timely fashion. Like, I mean, wheat acreage looks pretty good this fall. That would not have happened if it wouldn't have been for that nice fall that we had. And, you know, moistures, for the most part, that early harvest window, beans were actually too dry, right? Below 9% in some cases. But the majority of beans were in that normal time frame and moisture. So I think it really, really was a blessing.
Let's talk about, I guess, a few input decisions. You know, you're, again, you say this year taught you a lot about fertility, and, you know, it really is the key to pushing to that big yield number.
I think, you know, fundamentally, if you ask yourself, what's the difference between a field that goes 45 bushels and a field that goes 65 bushels? And let's take the disease aspect out of it for a second, or insects, and just say, you know, fundamentally, what's going on there? I believe the difference is basically, of course, you need the moisture, right? If you don't have the moisture, that's not going to work. But if you have the moisture, the fundamental difference is fertility. There's no doubt in my mind. And it's not just about pouring on the fertilizer. It really is about getting the nutrients into the plant, right? And so the only real way we know of doing that right now is to build soil fertility. And soil health also has something to do with it, to allow those plants to grow big roots, take more nutrients up. And of course, you know, if there's any kind of compaction or any of those problems, the roots can't take up the nutrients, right? So, yeah, we have a number of trials underway to try and understand that and take beans to the next level.
Talk about the fungicide story this year.
Right.
I mean, you've been tracking that. You know, some white mold issues this year.
Yes.
Where does fungicide sort of net out this year?
Well, so yeah, really it's been since 2004 since we first found any hint of soybean rust that everyone in North America really, and especially in our part of the world, has gotten interested in testing fungicides to see what the yield response is. And we've been on that as well. And so this year, of course, as soon as white mold enters the conversation, it becomes far more interesting, right, in terms of controlling that disease, because we know it's so detrimental. So at the end of the day, in our trials this year, now this was not with basically no white mold in our trials, just a little bit here and there, but not a lot. 2 to 3 bushels to 1 application, which is very consistent. We seem to show that year in and year out. Sometimes it's a bit more, sometimes, but it's pretty consistent. And then with 2 applications, 4+ bushels. Again, this year, very similar. So that's exciting. It starts to give us some confidence that in terms of taking soybeans to that next level, the fungicide package has to be part of it, right? So now, having said that, I've heard of some plot results. Haven't got them yet, but I've heard of some. Hope to get them soon, where there was white mold and up to 10 bushel yield response, right? Oh. So I believe that is real when you have white mold. Yeah.
Okay, so let's wrap this up with I guess what we learned from the soybean crop this year. You're going to be on the road.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Talking to the growers, probably kicking it off at the Southwest Ag Conference. What's going to be your message this winter? What are growers going to hear from you about what you learned this year about managing?
Yeah, so we have to talk about this fungicide story, right? What is the right timing? We are learning that it's earlier than we used to think, for sure, if there's white mold, right? If there's no white mold, the window's bigger, but it seems that we need to go earlier and earlier, so we need to focus in a little bit on that. The fertility story is pretty neat, right, what we're seeing. And we also have these intensive trials where we are trying different categories of inputs, and we have some really nice results with that, up to 10 bushel yield response to those plots. And so that's kind of, from an agronomic standpoint, if you put that together with some of the new genetics that we have, the new varieties, that really takes it to a pretty nice level, right? So those are some of the things that we'll be talking about. Of course, I've got a few other little ideas around rolling beans and some other kind of novel ways of trying to push beans.
Great. Hey, thank you for taking the time. We'll hear more on the circuit this winter.
Absolutely.
And, Look forward to seeing you out and about.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.